Welcome back, folks. So let us continue from where we left off last time. So we were talking about the beginning of this universe as we know now. And there was some mysterious energy that formed the basis of a explosion, a massive explosion. And it started out with some of the primordial elements that make up the matter that we see today. That includes you and me and all of us. And this energy that is spread out through this universe, it manifests itself in various ways. And we know from Einstein's equations that matter and energy are convertible. So matter is in fact a manifestation of some form of energy. And we will look at some interesting repercussions of this phenomenon. Obviously, it is of extreme interest to man what took place during this Big Bang and how did this happen. And there is a lot of curiosity behind this. A lot of brilliant minds are pursuing this. And what one might those who are following so far, the question that might come to one's mind is, why are we talking about all this when we are talking about the Bhagwad Gita? And we are going to come to that point. So bear with me as we keep going down this journey. Now, one thing that is taken for granted, and I will just give you a hint here, is as mysterious as this force that is responsible for the creation of this universe is, it is equally mysterious, if not greater, how a living being comes to be, how they are born, how do we come into existence is equally mysterious. Now, what happens sometimes is because it is all too common, we tend to become used to the mystery. Even the rising of the sun and setting of the sun is a wonderful thing, but we have gotten used to it. So we don't wonder about it as much. So if we begin to trace the root cause of things, and in general from a cosmology standpoint, not just from a astrophysics and science standpoint, this whole chain of cause and effect is because of which we stand today as we are. So this root cause, which started off anything, you can just take any phenomenon that you are trying to analyze, you come to a point where you decide or define a root cause. And the cause in Sanskrit is karana. And the if you want to roughly translate it, the root cause can roughly translate it is to uh, is called as Mahakarana. You can roughly translate it like that. There are several other places where this word has been used that means somewhat slightly different, but we are going to see it from this perspective, and it is very wonderful as we come close towards the analogy or the parallelism that we are studying here. It was wonderful how the thinkers I have 3,000, 4,000 years back, how they thought about things and the super conclusions that they came to. Okay, let's move on. So what happened was that in this attempt to understand this root cause from which everything has been made. So we know today that when we look at matter, we look at wood, look at plastic, it is made up of atoms of different chemicals, different elements, and they eventually boil down to some root elements. I mean, if you take salt, it is made up, it is sodium chloride, NaCl2, sodium and chlorine, and then you have got atoms of sodium and chlorine, and then you kind of look at them, what they are made up of. And what is very weird when you look at this is that there is if you look at this picture of an atom, there is a nucleus, the central part of this picture that is made up of protons and neutrons, around which there are these electrons revolving. And roughly the the, the largest orbit here of the electron who is drawing the largest orbit, roughly you can say, is the diameter of that atom of the sphere. The atom is that big, roughly you can say. But notice what is weird here, that most of it is empty space. It is virtually 70-80% of atom is space. When you say something like sodium chloride, there are different elements that hold these atoms. They are held together by different kinds of bonds that are there, which is nothing but attraction that takes place between different electrons and atoms. So if you really look at it, I am standing here on a wooden floor, and I put my foot down. I take my next step because I want to walk and I want to go in the front. So I put my step forward. Ideally, if 80% of this is space, my foot should sink down. But the reason that I don't is because there is some kind of energy that is there, that even though there is empty space, it gives it this kind of hard projection that on which this entire edifice kind of stands on it. So this core essence of matter is energy in various sorts, which combines together, and one layer on another. So this is kind of, well, this is not really the main cause, but this is one of the causes which come together, that holds together pieces of things that we call matter, and then that we see in everyday life, and it is responsible for not just me and you, the house that we live in, the earth that we walk on, the entire earth itself, and the galaxies, and the whole universe. This is some of the core forces that are at work, that hold all this wonderful play that we see around us at bay. These are the forces that hold them together. So what is very interesting is science obviously has come this far and there's a lot of progress being made, but Vedanta made a similar claim. Vedanta said that these forces that hold this base element of matter together, these are a part of us. And this also, this was a giant leap for the Vedantists, if you can imagine, for them to make such a statement, that these forces that hold me together are the same forces that hold this entire cosmos together. They had, I do not want to use the word audacity, but they had got the vision to see that if we are able to figure out what this core mysterious force that is holding me together, I will also solve. Not that they were looking for it, but they were aware that it will also solve the mystery of the universe. And in that attempt, although they were not looking, they had some notion of that, some inclination towards knowing what the origin of the universe was. They had theories. The most popular among them is the Purusha Sukta. It's very popular. It is said, recited in on several occasions. Sahasra Purusha. It's it's symbolic. So you have to take it in the it forms one of the main. Well, I shouldn't say main, but one of the most popular and important pieces of Riga Veda, which is one of the first of the Vedas, not one. It is the first Veda that is there. Sahasra Shirsha Purusha Sahasraksha Sahasrapat Sabhumim Vishwato Ritva Atyatishtat Dashangulam. Not getting into too many details, but it says that this, whatever this force is, it actually, what Vedanta claims, or what the Vedic rishis claimed, was going even beyond what science was claiming. Although science would always back up experimental or theoretical proposition by some kind of mathematical formula, which you won't directly find in a Vedantic postulate. Nevertheless, they had made this um, claim, or they had made this equation in their own sorts, that this force, Sahasra Shirsha Purusha Sahasraksha Sahasrapata, it is made up of thousands of different things that we can understand. What this verse further says is that after enveloping everything that is there, all creation that is there, this force, it stands yet out by 10 digits, 10 digits, 10 fingers, that is say. Again, it is all symbolic. It means it's more than that. It not only created this universe, but after the creation of the universe, there is still some energy, some kind of mysterious force that stays behind, even if we account for this, for all the energy that makes up the known cosmos. At one point, this is again an interesting thing, that when Einstein postulated his theory of relativity, and then he was trying to understand gravity, and he obviously found that the way Newton had defined gravity, it didn't hold up. There were instances where it wouldn't explain things, and that is where Einstein's equations in the orbit of Mercury. So his equations, they cleared things up, and science could explain some of these phenomena that were then not being able to define. The point I'm saying is that he put his equation, and the equation wouldn't it was not getting balanced the way he had put it here, his structure. It was not getting balanced, so he had to deliberately introduce a constant. It was then called as an infamous lambda constant, to account, because he in his analysis had said, or had assumed, that the universe has finished its expansion. The bubble had burst, the Big Bang had taken place, the universe had reached its status of equilibrium, and it was steady. he had made that assumption and come to various conclusions. And so when he derived his equation, it was not fitting that. And he had to deliberately introduce this lambda to account for the fact that this universe is static now. It is no longer expanding. And it was not until I believe 10, 15 years later when Hubble and Perlmutter, they were able to show that it is not the case. They are expanding, and he actually was relieved when that discovery took place that he in fact was right to begin with. And so they took out that constant. But then today, it turns out that there is necessity to reintroduce that. Why? Now here is where the statement of Purusha Sukta, that all this energy that you see that makes up this cosmos is just not it. There is more than that. And that is what they are discovering. It's called as dark energy. There are two words here, dark energy and dark matter. They had to introduce this invisible energy, this invisible matter, in order to explain certain phenomena that they are observing. And so this infamous constant has re-entered Einstein's equation. And just to give this reference of how the Vedic thinkers, they obviously didn't pursue this line because they had an idea of where this might lead. But then there was another line of thought that they pursued, and they were able to achieve what they were after, and therefore they did not have to further investigate this. They in fact reached some very fundamental conclusions about where this particular pursuit might lead to. They came to realize that this was going to be endless, and therefore they put a stop to this pursuit. But on the other hand, they did find out things that gave them satisfaction that they had indeed reached the end. If you, there are several places in several Upanishads, but in the Kenopanishad, where there is a discussion going on about uh, just a quick reference, what the Upanishads are basically question and answers about you pick a particular topic, and there is a master guru and a disciple who will ask him questions. The guru answers. That's kind of what the Upanishads are. So in the Kena Upanishad, uh, the the disciple is asking a similar kind of question, that I want to study this. How how is man able to see and think and talk and hear, and so on and so forth. I don't want to get too much into the details, but there's one line in that Kenopanishad that repeats 4 or 5 times. Tadeva brahmatvam vitti nedam yadidam upasate, which means the guru, he actually explains what his force is, and then he goes one step further to emphasize Tadeva Brahman, that alone is this mysterious force. Nedam yadidam upasate, not what this other thing that you are doing, it is not that. What I have told you, that is the only thing. So this is a very emphatic and profound statement that you find, and a very important one that kind of puts a stop onto this other pursuit. And it's a good thing. They know that because it's an endless pursuit. They know that you will not be getting anywhere with this. And we'll see how nicely it is unfolded in the Bhagwad Gita. Okay. So in order to understand what the beginning of this universe looked like, there was a interesting technique used. So you can see here that we are at 13.8 billion years now from the Big Bang. That is when it started. Now, this is a important point to grasp what we'll be explaining in the next 15-20 minutes. That when we see something, right, we um, there is a object in front of us, and light from the sun or tube light, whatever, some light source, it falls on this object, and then it gets reflected from that object, and it goes into the eye, and that's how we see it. So when that happens, so this light, it it falls on the object, and it enters our eyes, and a whole lot of things take place inside our the whole viewing mechanism, the vision mechanism. The photon gets converted into electricity. There are in the retina there are different pigments, rods and cones, and then there's an electric current generated, and so whatever happens, we are not talking about that. The light that comes from this source, it falls and it enters our eyes, and then we see that this light, it it is light, so it travels at the speed of light, 3 into 10 raised to 8 meters per second. So it's super fast. So this object, if there is a ball, there is one red ball that I'm looking at, and light fell on it, went into my eyes, and I could see it, and that's it, end of story. I don't think about it. But it is not that straightforward, because the light is traveling at its speed, at the speed of light. What we see, the world that we live in a world where our actions, the movements that we do, the things that we interact with generally, they are far slower as compared to the speed of the light. So it works for us, kind of. So we are under this illusion that we have seen this object. So why am I saying that? So let me explain that. If by some means I was able to introduce a delay, so this light falls on this object, and then I put something in the middle where this light, it goes into this absorption layer that I have put in the middle, and this layer, it traps the light for 5 minutes. I'm just picking some random time. So for 5 minutes, the light is trapped there, and then it gets released and I see it. So what does this mean? That the light, when it hit the ball at that time, when the light, at the time that it hit the ball, suppose I get up from my chair and I go and have a cup of coffee in 2 or 3 minutes, and I come back, and at the stroke of the 5th minute, I see that ball. Although what I'm looking at is something that has taken place 5 minutes back. So this ball that I see now, it may have moved, right? When the ray of light hit the ball, somebody came, the ray of light hit the ball, and then it started traveling towards my eye. And then somebody came and they moved the ball. They replaced the red one with a blue one. So when the light entered my eye, I see that it is a red ball. 5 more minutes have to pass, and then I see it has become blue now. So the time that it took for the light to travel from that object to my eye, in that time, I don't know what happened to the object. So there is this medium through which information is being fed to me and then being processed. This medium is corrupting that information. I will never ever be able to know the real nature of the object I'm trying to observe. It is maybe a fraction of the speed of light, but even that, I am not able to see the object when and where it is at that exact same time. It is delayed. This is a very big problem when we are measuring things at subatomic levels, subatomic particles, which is where Heisenberg's uncertainty principle stems from, that you cannot measure the position and the velocity of the electron at the same time. We don't want to get into a physics lesson here, but I think this is clear enough that the information that we are getting is corrupted. We live in a world of a very grand illusion. Things come to us at so many different moments of time and they kind of somehow converge and we make sense out of it. So this is a grand illusion that all of us are living, and it makes we make sense out of it. That's a discussion for another day, and great stalwarts like Adi Shankaracharya have made some very mind-boggling observations and explanations of how this all comes together and what the meaning of this is. Because the more you start thinking about it, the more you realize how very fragile this whole framework of knowing is. The information processing that takes place, if the very core of the source of the information is corrupted, what is the point in having a very sophisticated post-processing mechanism? If x plus y is equal to 2 and my value of x itself is, I'm not sure of it, how would I solve this equation? I cannot solve this equation. So this is a different train of thought. There is a different point that we want to focus on here. The point is that this light which we see is the carrier of information, and if we are careful enough, if we are smart enough, we can use this light as a clue to tread back into history. This forms very interesting. So if you wanted to see Napoleon or Julius Caesar, you wanted to see him, then or somebody like, yeah, some people here may not know, like Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj or some historical figure. If a light that bounced off of him is been reflected, it has been there, it just doesn't, some part of it gets vanished, but somewhere it's bouncing in the universe, and if I see it now, in theory I should be able to see him. It's not that fantastic as you might think. So nevertheless, the point I'm making here is that this light that started this Big Bang is still around. If you have got the courage, the persistence, the knowledge, the technology, the perseverance to see it, you might be able to see it. And this is one of the things that the scientists were trying to figure out. There are other indirect means. Now, this is one other aspect that the Vedantists, they have been so very gracious, so very accurate, and it's kind of a tribute to their brilliance, how they came up with these techniques to study things that are so beyond the intellectual realm. So there are there are two things that you will find in the Vedantic books that are there. The Advaita Vedantist, especially the logic. There's a ton of logic that is there. It will make your head spin, and in fact, it's not advisable to start looking into too much of logic, because you leave the core matter behind. It's like you are studying the Ramayana and you start finding, or the Mahabharata. In the Ramayana, you start finding faults with the grammar, and then Rama and Sita is left behind, and you are left with all these issues with grammar. So we don't want to do that. We just want to know enough of the things that are there in logic, not to go overboard with it. So there is two things in there. One is called as Tatastha Lakshan and one is Swarupa Lakshan. What they mean is that since the object we are trying to study is so difficult to know, we find indirect ways to try and figure out what it is. So this is one of the indirect ways, but it is not a shot in the dark. It is based on science. We know how light works. We know how vision works. We know where the light is. We know how the galaxies, well, most of it, or the stars were born. And therefore, this was a very wise and scientific reason how they can use this light to figure out what may have happened at that time. And by figuring that out, then we will come to know even more about what happened. Again, science at this point, it just continues to explore one thing after another. It discovers things only to realize that by discovering that one thing, a whole new world again opens up. Now, unlike the Vedantist, where, like I mentioned in the Kenopanishad, there are several other places where similar things is there. Tadeva Brahmatvam Vidhi Nedam Yadidam Upasate. They put a full stop. You don't have to go beyond this. In Kathopanishad, there is a very detailed analysis of how this world of experience is made up of, and they reach a point where they also make a very, very emphatic statement that this is the end. Indriyabhya parayartha. Indriya is, we don't want to get into this, but just to show you how they have analyzed Indriyabhya parayartha, arthebhyascha param manaha. Objects of senses are superior to the senses. The mind is superior to these objects. So para means superior. So on it goes. Indriyabhya parayartha, arthebhyascha param manaha. Manasastu para buddhi. Buddher atma mahan paraha. Mahata param avyaktam. Avyaktat param purusha. This is the last stage, right? They don't stop here. Avyaktat param purusha. Purusha na param kinchit sa kashta sa paragati. They put a full stop. Unlike science, they say this is the end. After analyzing this, and they come to this point, sa kashta sa paragati. That is the end, final thing. So we'll see that. So the point to grasp here is that we want to somehow grab hold of this light. There is now that we know this theory, we have studied it a lot, and we know what we are looking for. We also know the thing that we are looking for, which is this light that has started 13.8 billion years ago, this light is feeble. It is fickle. It is fine. It is very subtle. It is so fine that one small disturbance here and there, and we will lose it. So we want to be as focused as we can. We want to use tools and technologies that can be as finished as possible. This is an important step in this process of evolution to know what is this final truth. We are aware of some mechanism that can lead us there. And this mechanism, this light, in this case we are talking about, is the nature of this mechanism also we are aware of. So this phenomenon, if I can use the word here, of us being aware on the basis of this ton of study that we have done, that now, since I know all these things and this is the light after, this realization of the knowledge that we are after is a very important step in the Vedantic process. In from a of course, from a scientific standpoint too, it's an important process. But Vedanta says that in order for somebody to pursue its teachings, you need to be aware of some of these fundamental things. You need to have that drive. You need to have that curiosity. They say that today, because of this problem of dark energy and dark matter, who can solve it? So maybe there is some event that will take place that can help them. That's one thing in the cosmos. Or they say that we need one more Einstein to come. And about Einstein, they say that what makes him so special is his extreme curiosity. That is what is required. An extreme curiosity about what is this thing. And so in Vedanta, that thing is called as adhikaritva. You need to have the appropriate adhikaritva before you study some of these Vedantic texts. Otherwise, it's going to be useless. So this is one requirement. If you, I don't want to digress too much, but there is one other profound text, Vedanta text, that some of the advanced Vedantic followers study, which is called as Brahma Sutra. Sutra is aphorisms. It's like there's Patanjali's Yoga Sutra are there, which are aphorisms of yoga. This is Brahma Sutra. Sutra really means a formula or an equation. So there are 555 of them. They are very intricate, and they are like terse, mnemonic. It's 3 or 4 words, and you will find 1,000 pages worth of book written on those three words in one aphorism. And there are 555. Anyhow, not to digress too much, but the first of that is Athato Brahma Jitnyasa. That's the first Brahma Sutra that is there, which says that like I said, it's a huge topic. In short, though, you need to have adhikaritva. That is what it means. You have to be well prepared. You just cannot start learning integration and derivatives without knowing calculus. So it's kind of like that. You have to have that kind of preparation. So in case of the Big Bang, I'm just trying to parallel here, that we need to try and look for the light that either came from the bang itself or whatever the first source of light that we can take a look at. And this this attempt or this endeavor, so now that we know what we are looking for now, so we need to take the next steps in order to see that. So what is the next step that we see? I'm deliberately taking the parallel of this the science aspect of cosmology, and it's it's very close to the Vedantic aspect of cosmology. And you will see where all this comes together in the second chapter of the Bhagwad Gita. Obviously, all that we are discussing, that someone might ponder or wonder, what has this got to do with the Gita? We are getting there, I assure you. We have not got too much time left, but I think I will cover this one slide, and then I will conclude today's session. But now that we know that we want to look for this light, what do we do? So we need to use the right tools, the right technology, the right techniques in order for us to look at this light. This light being so feeble, it is out of question for us to look for this light in the daytime, because we the sun is so close to the earth that if you take a torch and you try to shine the torch at the sun, it is ridiculous. It's stupid. You are what do you think you're going to see? Are you going to see the beam of that flashlight going towards the sun? Even if it is there, you will not be able to see it, right? So being in the vicinity of the sun to make an observation about these fine current of light that you are after, that is started out 1 billion years back, it is a exercise in fatuousness. You know it is futile. The sun is going to overpower you, overwhelm you. You are not going to see it. It is not possible. Now, it is not that the sun is so powerful. There are other stars in the cosmos that are even much more powerful than the sun. They would, if they stand next to the sun and earth would stand where it is, they would scorch the earth, burn it. Even some of the stars would just convert earth to ash, the kind of strength that they have. But sun is the one that's closest to us. We have no other option but to try and conduct our search when the sun is not around. So that's why can we take this decision? Because we have got the adhikaritva. We know what we are looking for. We are obviously aware that we can see the stars in the sky shining when the sun is not around. Is it that the stars are not there when the sun rises? They are there. We just can't see it. So here we have to wait till the sun goes down, and then we can use a telescope. So this is the first tool that we can use in order to observe the heavens and study the stars or the light that is coming from the stars. And we pursue our study that way. And then what do we find? Very soon we find that this attempt of ours, though sublime and thoughtful, is far short of what we set out to do, because the light that is there in our cities, that is there, that is shown by the buildings that are there, are the street lights. They are too a massive source of obstruction in our observation. So we have to eliminate those two. So what do? What you do is you go out of the city. You go out of the city and you go into some remote area where there is no civilization, no other light sources. We are trying to eliminate any other sources of distraction that is there. And I'm deliberately avoided the a word here, which I will now state that we are trying to eliminate. That word is called noise. So noise is a very typical word. Generally, we mean sound bite, but noise means that anything other than what we are interested in, right? So if you take a ECG waveform, electrocardiogram from a heart, the bandwidth in which it falls, it from 0 to 110 hertz, the our power lines that carry the power current, they fall in that bandwidth, 50 hertz, 60 hertz. And so you will see the waveform and electrocardiogram, if you have not filtered it properly, it will keep going like that, So that is noise, this 50 hertz. So we have to filter the noise and get to the waveform that is of interest to us. So remove everything else. That is noise. Noise, which is something that obstructs us from understanding, visualizing, seeing things that are of interest to us. We are over our time limit here. So I will continue with this, but I'm deliberately taking these examples so we can draw a very nice parallel of this example, and they are not that far off. This kind of thinking had taken place in the Vedic times, and this corruption that takes place of information from the source to our intellect, where the cognition takes place, is also not something that is uh, a recent phenomenon, a recent discovery. It obviously Vedanta discovered it several thousand years ago, but even Western philosophers did. There was Emmanuel, who writes in his Critique of Pure Reason. He calls it, it's in German, but he calls it the thing in itself. So there is everything that we observe is through the prism of time, space, and causation. Now, this is a very big topic. We obviously don't have time for that. But there is a prism, and what we see is behind the prism. We never see that object ever in our life. It is always coming through this, I would say, a kind of corrupt medium. There's a medium there between us and these objects that's forever corrupting whatever information comes to us. So this is a unknown thing, and it manifests itself in such interesting, weird, phenomenal ways in so many places. The most mind-boggling of this is something that was observed because of the bending of the space-time continuum by some heavy objects. We are far over time, so maybe next time, depending on the context, I might just mention a little bit of that. So thanks for listening to this, and we will continue with our session next time. See you next time. Bye.